David Thompson didn't think. He jumped. The camera slipped from his hands, crashing into the wet dirt behind him. The river was wild, brown with mud, roaring like a beast. But all David could see was the lion cub, tiny, helpless, swept away. "Hold on, little guy," he gasped, diving in. The water hit him like a wall. It was colder than he expected, faster too. 1 second his feet touched the bottom. The next, he was floating, spinning, choking on river water. The cub's tiny head bobbed up ahead, eyes wide, paws flailing. David kicked hard, arms slicing through the current. Every muscle in his body screamed. A tree branch whipped past his face, cutting his cheek. Come on," he muttered, teeth clenched. He reached the cub. It wasn't moving much anymore. Just a soft, pitiful cry from its throat. "I've got you," David breathed, wrapping an arm around the shivering body. The cub's claws gripped his shirt with surprising strength. Its heart thudded fast against David's chest. The river didn't let up. It pulled them both like they were nothing. A log smacked his shoulder. Pain exploded down his arm, but he didn't let go. Behind them, thunder rolled. The storm that caused all this was still far from done. "I need to get us out," he said, through gritted teeth. "You're not dying today." With one good arm, he paddled sideways, away from the deepest part. The bank was close now, just a little more. Water filled his ears. He couldn't hear his own breath, but he saw it. A break in the current, a shallow bend. Using every last bit of strength, David pushed forward, dragging them both toward the edge. Finally, his knees hit mud. He collapsed onto the shore, chest heaving, the cub still clinging to him. "I got you," he whispered. "You're safe." But when he looked up, he wasn't alone. Golden eyes stared back at him from the trees. 6 of them, a lion pride, watching in silence. And David realized this rescue wasn't over. It was just beginning. The cub whimpered, its tiny paws digging into David's soaked shirt. He held it tight, gasping for breath as the river dragged them both downstream. "Just hold on, little one," he muttered, coughing out muddy water. The current slammed into him again, spinning them sideways. His arm throbbed from the earlier hit, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. The cub clung to him like it knew. This man was its only chance. Branches whipped past, scraping his face. Debris floated all around. Logs, broken brush, and worse. He knew what lurked beneath. Crocodiles. David's eyes darted across the water. Any second, one could appear. They were fast, silent, and deadly. He tried to push the thought away. Fear wouldn't save them. "Stay with me," he whispered. "I've got you." The cub let out a weak cry, pressing its face into his chest. David kept paddling, kicking with every ounce of strength he had left. But the current was winning. It wanted them. A dark shape moved beneath the surface. His heart stopped. "No, not now," he breathed. Suddenly a log slammed into his ribs, knocking the wind out of him. He slipped under. The cub's weight pulled him deeper. Underwater. He opened his eyes. The cub's eyes were wide with panic. David kicked, reaching for the surface. He broke through, gasping. The cub was still there, shaking, crying, alive. David looked ahead. He saw a bend in the river, shallow ground. But it was far, too far. "Come on," he growled, dragging them both through the current. His muscles screamed. His lungs burned. Another cry from the cub. "I won't let go," he shouted. The shore was getting closer. Mud, stones, safety. He reached for it. Just before he collapsed onto solid ground, he turned his head. No crocodiles, just water. And then, silence. David dropped to his knees, the cub still in his arms. But as he looked up, they were surrounded. The pride had arrived. David collapsed on the muddy riverbank, chest heaving. The cub trembled in his arms, soaked and barely moving. "We made it," he whispered, but before relief could sink in, he felt it. Eyes. He looked up and froze. 6 lions. Silent. Still. Watching. Golden eyes stared straight at him from the edge of the trees. They weren't blinking. They weren't moving. They were waiting. David's throat went dry. The cub whimpered again, shifting. In his arms. "Oh no," he whispered. "It's their cub." The biggest lioness stepped forward. Her paws made no sound on the wet ground. Her stare didn't break. David felt like the world had stopped. "This is how I die," he thought. His mind raced. Should he run? No. They'd catch him before he took 2 steps. Should he put the cub down? Would they think he heard it? The cub made a soft sound, like a chirp, and snuggled tighter into David's chest. "I'm not going to hurt you," David whispered to the pride. "I swear, I saved him." The lionesses didn't move, not a snarl, not a growl. Just eyes, sharp, glowing, impossible to read. David slowly shifted to his knees. His injured shoulder screamed, but he didn't let go of. The cub. He didn't dare. The male lion stepped forward now. Massive, dark-maned. His breath came out in short huffs. David didn't blink. "Easy," he murmured. "I'm not your enemy." Still, no one moved. The cub lifted its head, looked at the pride, and gave a soft cry. The kind only family would know. Then, the matriarch stepped forward. David didn't breathe. His heart pounded. His hands tightened on the cub. She was close now. Too close. One more step, and then she did something no one expected. She lowered her head, and everything changed. David stayed frozen. The cub shifted in his arms, but he didn't move a muscle. The lioness was just feet away now, her golden eyes locked onto his. There was no growl, no roar, just silence. Then, slowly, she lowered her head. David blinked. His mind couldn't process what he was seeing. "Is she bowing?" he whispered. The massive lioness, the leader of the pride, stood still in that position, her head down, her body calm. David's breath caught in his throat. This can't be happening," he muttered. The cub made a soft sound again, like it was calling to her. She responded with a low, rumbling chuff. Not a warning, a greeting. Her eyes met David's again, and in that moment, he saw it. It wasn't anger, it wasn't threat, it was something else entirely. Recognition. It was like she knew what he had done, like she understood. "I saved your baby," David whispered, voice shaking. "That's all." The lioness didn't step forward. She didn't attack. She just stood there, still and sure, watching him with the calm of a mother who had found what was lost. The other lionesses stayed back. The male didn't move. All eyes were on their leader. David's legs trembled. Not from fear, but from something deeper, something emotional. He looked down at the cub, who now peeked out from his arms, eyes wide but calm. "Looks like your mom's here," David said softly. "And she's not mad." The lioness finally raised her head. She took one slow step closer, never breaking eye contact. And for the first time in his life, David felt something impossible. A wild animal saying thank you. David couldn't stop shaking. The cold water, the pain in his shoulder, the weight of the cub in his arms. It all faded beneath the weight of what was happening in front of him. The lioness moved closer, slow and careful. Her head lowered again. A second bow. "Is she thanking me?" David whispered, barely able to speak. The cub let out a soft mew, like it was answering him. David blinked through the water in his eyes. The lioness was now just a foot away. her. Breath was warm. Her eyes were soft. He didn't move, didn't flinch. The moment felt too big, too fragile. Behind her, the rest of the pride stood in total silence. Not a sound. Not a step. It was like they were watching something sacred. David looked around. No camera. No people. Just him, the cub, and 6 lions that should have killed him by now. But they didn't. The lioness leaned forward again, not with her teeth, but with her forehead. She pressed it gently to his. David froze. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might stop. It wasn't a threat. It was a greeting. A lion's way of saying you're one of us. "I don't understand," he whispered. "Why me?" The cub chirped again and reached toward the lioness. She made a soft, chuffing sound in return, a mother's voice calling her baby home. David looked down. "He's yours," he said, voice trembling. But the lioness didn't take the cub right away. She just looked at David, like she was studying him, feeling his soul. Then, finally, she stepped back. Not fast, not nervous, just sure. The bull was complete. The pride still didn't move. It was as if they needed her permission. David looked at them, still holding the cub close, and for the first time, he didn't feel like prey. He felt like someone they had accepted, even if just for a moment. David didn't know how long he stayed frozen. The cub rested in his arms, quiet now, almost calm. The lioness stood right in front of him. She looked at him, not with wildness but with something deeper, something human-like. Then she leaned in. David flinched, expecting teeth, but instead, her tongue touched his forehead. One slow, rough lick, like a mother cleaning her own cub. David's breath caught in his throat. "She's grooming me," he whispered. The lioness licked him again, slower this time. It wasn't just an action. It was trust. She was showing the pride he was safe. David's hands trembled. "What is this?" he whispered. "Why me?" The cub purred softly against his chest as if he already knew the answer. Behind her, the other lions finally began to move. Just a little. Slowly. Carefully. But their bodies were relaxed. Their eyes were soft. No growls, no fear. It was like they were watching a ceremony. David lowered his head, not in fear, but out of respect. He didn't want to break whatever this moment was. The lioness gave one last gentle lick and then stepped back. Her breathing was steady. Her tail flicked once, calm, not angry. "I'm not one of you," David whispered, "but thank you." The other lionesses came closer now, not in a rush, but with quiet steps. They stopped a few feet away, still watching him like he was something they didn't expect to find. The male lion stood back, still silent, but he didn't look tense anymore. David sat in the mud, soaked, surrounded by 6 lions and a cub who had somehow made him part of their world. And in that moment, he realized something deep. This wasn't just about a rescue. It was about being seen. David stayed kneeling, soaked and shaking, unsure what came next. But then, something happened he'd never forget. The lioness who had groomed him stepped to his right. Another lioness came to his left. Then 2 more moved behind him, calm and steady. The massive male lion, silent, powerful, walked to his side. They weren't surrounding him to trap him. They were forming lines beside him. David looked around, confused. "What are you doing?" he whispered. The cub let out a small chirp and wriggled out of his arms. It didn't run away. It walked right next to him like a guide. One of the lionesses chuffed softly, nudging David with her nose. She wasn't pushing. She was inviting him to move. David slowly stood up. His knees almost gave out, but he took a step forward, and the lions walked with him. 2 lines, one on each side, David in the middle. It felt unreal, like a royal escort. He glanced down. The cub looked up at him and blinked slowly, then trotted forward a few steps, tail high. David let out a soft laugh. "Okay, little guy, lead the way." They moved slowly, away from the river, through the grass, through the silence. Each lion walked in perfect rhythm. No one growled, no one rushed. They were protecting him. David's heart thudded in his chest, not from fear, but from something else. Honor. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. The male lion looked over for a moment, just one glance. It was enough. This wasn't about what he deserved. It was about what he did, and in their world, that mattered. As they reached a clearing, the lions began to spread out. The cub stopped, looked back at David. It was time. David knelt again, heart pounding. The cub stopped in front of him, unsure for just a moment. Then David whispered, "Go on. Your family's waiting." He gently placed the cub on the grass. What happened next hit harder than any words. The pride rushed, in soft growls, quick steps, bodies brushing past David but never touching him. The matriarch was first. She nuzzled the cub, checking every inch. Her tail curled with relief. The cub squealed and pressed into her chest, nuzzling hard like it hadn't seen her in days. One by one, the other lionesses came close. They sniffed the cub, purred, licked his face. It was more than a reunion. It was a mother's joy, a family's return. David backed away slowly, not wanting to interrupt. He stood there, soaked and silent, watching the moment unfold. He had never seen anything so pure. A deep chuff pulled his attention. The matriarch turned from her cub and walked to him, one last time. David didn't move. She stood before him, head tilted, eyes calm. Then she pressed her forehead to his. No growl, no fear, just quiet respect. David swallowed hard, his voice cracked. "Thank you for trusting me." She pulled back slowly, then released a soft, breathy sound. A goodbye. The male lion stepped forward, next. He didn't touch David, just stared for a second, then turned away. The cub was last. It trotted over, looked up, and mewed. David dropped to one knee. "Be strong, little one." He reached out, gently brushed the cub's head. And then, the cub turned and ran back to the pride. David stayed kneeling. His heart was full. His eyes were wet. It wasn't just a goodbye. It was the end of something sacred. David packed up his camera in silence, still damp from the river, his heart still racing from the goodbye. What he didn't realize was that the camera on his chest, the small, waterproof one, had been recording the entire time. Hours later, back at his tent, he replayed the footage. And then, he sat in stunned silence. Every moment was there. The rescue, the bull, the grooming, the escort. He uploaded it to his backup drive. No fancy editing. Just raw truth. By the next morning, it had spread across the internet like wildfire. Millions watched as lions treated a man not as prey, but as one of their own. Comments poured in. "I've never seen anything like this. This made me cry. This changes how I see animals forever." News channels picked it up. Wildlife experts debated it. Some called it luck, others a fluke. But then came Dr. Sarah Mbeki, a top animal behaviorist. She studied the footage, frame by frame. Her voice played on a news clip. That wasn't survival instinct. That was something else. A reporter asked, "Then what was it?" She replied, "It's not behavior. It's connection, gratitude, something beyond instinct. He saved a cub, and they knew." David gave one interview. He said softly, "I didn't plan to be a hero. I just couldn't let the cub die." He never watched the footage again. But the world did. Documentaries were made. Scientists wrote papers. Schools played it for students. Even animal rights groups used it to teach compassion. One headline read, "The Man Who Was Accepted by Lions." David stayed quiet. He returned to the Mara, back to his work. But nothing felt the same. Because now, he wasn't just a photographer. He was part of something deeper, something wild, something sacred, and far away in the golden grasslands. The lions hadn't forgotten him either. Word spread across the savannah faster than any news. The locals began calling David something new, Simba's brother. It started with a guide, smiling as David returned to camp. "The cub," he said, "he waits for you." David blinked. "Waits for me." The guide nodded. He remembers, he knows, and he did. The once small cub was now stronger, his mane just starting to come in. Not yet king, but no longer helpless. He visited often. Never too close, never too far, just near enough to be seen. David would sit under the shade of his jeep, and the lion would lie nearby, his golden eyes calm. Sometimes he would let out a soft rumble, not a roar. Something gentler. Familiar, he sees you as pride. A ranger said one evening, "That's what lions do when they bond." David smiled. "Then I'm proud to be one of them." The cub never came alone. A lioness or two would follow at a distance, watching, protecting, but they never stopped him. Tourists came too, hoping to see the moment for themselves. They asked David, "Is it real? Does he really remember?" David would nod. "He does. He always looks at me like he knows." Guides would smile. "That's why we call you Simba's brother." One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, the young lion came closer than ever. He rested his head on the tire of David's jeep and closed his eyes. David sat quietly, moved beyond words. No camera, no crowd, just two souls. Side by side, he whispered, "You're not just a lion to me." And somehow deep down he felt the lion understood. The bond was still there, unbroken, untamed, and stronger than ever. The dry season had ended. Rain returned. To the Mara fast, without warning. David was out deeper than usual, tracking elephant herds for a photo shoot. He didn't see the clouds building behind the hills. By the time he packed his gear, the sky had gone black. Thunder cracked. Rain slammed down like a wall. David ran. "I need to find shelter," he muttered, shielding his face. Fast. But the open savanna was endless, and he had wandered too far from his vehicle. His GPS wouldn't load. His radio was dead. Water soaked through his clothes. The wind howled. He slipped on wet ground and hit his knee hard. "Come on," he groaned, dragging himself up. Then he heard it, a low, deep roar cutting through the storm. He froze. Another roar, closer. David turned slowly, out of the mist and rain. Came shapes, not one, not two. A full pride, they moved through the storm like ghosts, calm, silent, and leading them was him. The cub, now grown, strong, full-maned, proud. No longer small, no longer afraid. David's breath caught. "It's you," he whispered. The lion stopped in front of him. Their eyes met. For a moment, the storm faded. David took one step forward. "You found me." The lion huffed and walked toward him. Behind, the pride spread out, forming a wide circle, just like they had that day by the river. David didn't speak again. He didn't need to. The lion nudged his shoulder gently. A greeting, the same greeting from before. David reached out, resting his hand near the lion's neck. I thought I was lost, he said. But you came back. He smiled through the rain. The lion stayed close, guarding, and in the middle of the wild, during the worst of the storm, David wasn't alone. The rains ended weeks ago, but the moment never left David's heart. He began seeing pride more often now, always from a respectful distance. But something had changed. The matriarch, once so strong, was moving slower. Her steps were careful, her body is leaner. One afternoon, David spotted her limping near the tree line. She paused and looked directly at him. His chest tightened. "She's getting old," he whispered. The cub, now a powerful adult lion, walked beside her, protective, watchful. David stepped down from his jeep and knelt, not too close, just enough to show he understood. The matriarch walked forward. No rush. No fear. The pride waited behind her, still and silent. David could see it in her eyes, still sharp, still proud, but softer now, tired. She stopped in front of him. Then she did it one last time. She bowed her head. David felt tears rise. He dropped his eyes and whispered, "You don't have to. I already know." The lioness lifted her head slowly, then stepped to the side. She lay down beside the grown cub, her son, her legacy. The other lions gathered around her, forming a circle. David didn't move. He knew what was happening. The pride stayed quiet, brushing against her, grooming her gently. A few moments later, the matriarch let out a soft breath and closed her eyes. Still, peaceful, gone. David placed his hand on the ground, just inches away. "Goodbye," he whispered. "Thank you for trusting me." The grown lion looked up at him, eyes steady, then walked over. He pressed his forehead to David's shoulder. No sound, no roar, just presence, a final bond, a final bow. David stood slowly and backed away, giving the pride their space. And as he walked back to his jeep, he looked over his shoulder one last time. The queen of the wild had passed, but her spirit lived on. In her cub, in her pride, and in the heart of the man she once called kin. Word of the pride spread far beyond the Mara. People used to fear lions here. Drivers warned tourists to stay inside the jeeps. Cameras shook with every growl caught on film. But now they came hoping to see them, the ones they called the Peace Pride. Tourists whispered, "Are they really that calm?" Guides smiled and said, "Wait, you'll see." And they did. The lions didn't hide. They walked through tall grass like shadows, bold but gentle. They passed beside vehicles, looked up, and kept moving, unbothered, unafraid. David sat quietly on the edge of the open field, camera in hand, but his finger never touched the shutter. He didn't come to take pictures anymore. He came to see them. The grown lion, strong and proud, always walked ahead. He didn't roar, he didn't chase. He watched. Sometimes he'd stop near David's jeep and just sit. One day, a little girl in the back seat asked, "Why doesn't he run away?" Her father replied, "Because that man saved him once." David heard her and smiled. Another tourist leaned over to a guide. "You think they still remember?" The guide nodded. Lions forget nothing, especially kindness. Sometimes the pride would circle David's camp at night. Not close, not dangerous, just present, like guards, protectors. David would sit by the fire and whisper, "You're still watching over me, huh?" No answer came. None was needed. Even the local rangers noticed the change. "These lions," one of them said, "they act like they're protecting the land, not just living on it." And maybe they were, because in a world where wild once meant deadly, this pride became something else, a symbol of trust, of memory, of peace. and the man who once risked his life for a drowning cub had unknowingly changed what lions meant to the world. The story didn't end with viral videos or silent bows. It inspired something bigger. Dr. Sarah Mbeki, the same expert who studied the footage, launched the Thompson-Mara Research Foundation, a place dedicated to studying emotional intelligence in wild animals, starting with lions. She stood in front of a small crowd one morning and said, "He crossed a line," and they welcomed him. Photos of David and the pride flashed behind. Her, not just the rescue, but the reunion, the walk, the bow. "This changes how we think about animals," she continued. "They feel more than we ever believed. They choose who they trust." The foundation hired trackers, scientists, local guides. They mapped lion movements, monitored their sounds, studied how they cared for each other, and how they remembered. David never liked the spotlight. He came only once to speak. The room fell silent when he stepped forward. He looked down, then said softly, "I didn't save a cub." He paused, eyes misty. "I met a family." That was all he said. It was enough. The foundation grew. Schools taught the story. Wildlife centers shared the footage with kids. Tourists came with different eyes, not just to see predators, but to witness connection. Locals took pride in what had happened on their land, and in every corner of the research center, one photo hung larger than the rest. A wet, muddy man holding a tiny lion cub, while 6 lions stood behind him in silence. A photo that didn't need a caption, because the world already knew what it meant. Years passed. The Mara changed. New cubs were born. Old lions faded, but the story lived on. David didn't come often anymore. Age had slowed him down. But on one quiet morning, he returned for one final visit. He didn't bring his camera, just memories. He walked slowly through the grass, alone. But something in his chest told him he wasn't truly by himself. He stopped under a familiar acacia tree, the same one where it all began. And then he heard it, not a roar, not a growl, a soft breath. From the tall grass, a lion stepped out. Not just any lion. Him. The cub, now fully grown, stood tall. His mane was thick. His eyes still held that calm. David smiled. "You're still here." The lion walked forward, no hesitation, no fear. He stopped just inches away. David didn't speak again. He didn't have to. The lion leaned in and gently pressed his forehead to David's, just like his mother once did. David closed his eyes. His voice cracked. "Thank you for remembering me." They stood like that for a long time, man and lion, neither moving, neither needing more. Finally, the lion stepped back, turned, and disappeared into the grass. David stayed a moment longer, then whispered, "Goodbye, my friend." He walked back slowly, one last time, his heart full, his soul at peace. Some stories end in silence. Others, in a quiet goodbye between two souls who found each other in a world that never expected it. Because love, even between man and lion, leaves a mark that time can't erase. If this story moved you, share it with someone who still believes in kindness. Subscribe for more emotional animal stories that prove the wild is full of heart. And remember, sometimes one act of compassion can change the world.